lot of fun making the latest segment of our walk down memory road. Having the opportunity to speak to Talks, Charles, and Tabang was great. This one is special because all three of these guys are guys that really embody um, the style of coaching that really resonates with me. Um, all these coaches are able to get out um, a really playful side out of themselves and really enjoy and be present in the moments with their players. All of them are also incredibly good on a one-on-one basis in terms of mentoring their players and being able to bring out a mental fortitude and strength out of their players. So it was really great to get the chance to be able to speak to them. Um, in fact, we could have spoken to them forever and about many, many more things. But nonetheless, it was great to get this opportunity to speak to them, and this definitely won't be the last time speaking to these guys. That's how much we enjoyed speaking to them. But nonetheless, um, have a listen to our latest installment. Hope you enjoy.
I'm very excited today. Another one that's really special to me. Obviously, it's always great to catch up with the kids that we worked with, but the opportunity to catch up with coaches and coaches who I rate of an exceptional class, and what an opportunity to be able to catch up with Talks. Obviously, Talks being my brother, and being a younger brother, learning so much from him, and having the opportunity to speak sports. Someone once said to me, and it comes from a poem, don't worry too much about the critics, but worry more about the critics that count. And it's really great to coach in South Africa. You get given so much advice and people want to help. And, thank you for that. But it's nice to get advice from somebody whose opinion I value, and not just in terms of rugby, but in sports as a whole. So it's great to get the opportunity to speak to Talks, and we'll tap in a bit as well into our travels, and which took me a long time to convince him to finally be that guy. But thank God that I finally broke through. And then Coach Charles. Charles, I haven't known as long as I've known Thabz or Talks that you've made on me as a coach, and a guy when I've watched you coach and then I listened to you talking to the kids and the stuff that you put out on social media and just the relationship you have as a border master with the kids, I'm blown away all the time. I think your style, I think all three of you are people with a style that really resonates with me in terms of how you deal with people and how you see people and how you see teams and the individual. And Charles, you're no different to, I think you're an amazing coach, and I think you have an amazing story. It's a really interesting one, and one that I think lots of people need to hear. So I'm really glad that you're here today. And then Coach Tap, and I say Tap because that's what the kids used to call him, the girls. What a wonderful opportunity to work with you and Glenn at King David with the girls firstly, and then the things that you did with the boys. I remember the Cape Town tour and the soccer that you were playing. I'll never forget the one game. It was on Gemo. Gemo was Glenn.
Yeah.
Gemo was the bottom team.
Right at the bottom. Across
yes,
the road.
I think Tabang's team were winning. They were already 7-0 up at halftime, and then he gave them an objective that before they can score, they need to make like a total of like 50 passes, something ridiculous like that. So they were it became a practice, a training session. And I was like, wow. Like, I like the concept of, okay, what goals still make it really like challenging for us. And I remember the one player, I think it was Aaron Stam, was on a hat trick. And he was so frustrated because on quite a few times he had made the run, but it wasn't past 50 passes. I don't think he ended up getting his hat trick, but I loved the focus on team and not individuals. And I think Thabz as a coach, you're phenomenal. And then eventually I got you to Parktown, and the things you did in basketball at King David as well. I think as well, a guy who, and not just one specific sport, but the beauty that can come from working in different sports. So to have all of you guys here is really awesome for me.
Yeah, I must say it's the first time I've seen Talks so still. He hasn't moved. But it's fantastic. And then Charles, lovely meeting you. I hope, that I get to meet you in person one day. Jabs obviously rates you highly, and that is something that is to be respected, because he doesn't just rate anybody. Talks, we go back a long way. He's actually my cousin. So is Jabs. I don't know how, but we ended up becoming cousins. So when Jabs talks about his brother being here, I generally talk about family as well. And over the years, that's how close we've become a family and a unit. And Coach Thabz, we go back a long way when basketball at King David was barely starting, and I think the challenge that you had was to try and build a team and make do with what you had over there. And I think you did quite well. And I think at Parktown as well, you've done the exact same thing with basketball. Also, quite a new sport at Parktown. And watching your first team play this year was it was good to see that there's a whole lot of talent over there. So it's really fantastic. And unfortunately, you came unstuck against us, but that happens. It's just part of the game, man. But welcome, gents, and welcome to Coach's Corner. Jabs, I want to hand it over to you.
Yeah, no, I think first up, it would be really great for everyone to hear where your coaching career started, how it came about, and what it is exactly that you're doing today, currently. So if we can start with you, Charles.
Thank you very much, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay, cool. My name is, I'm a tennis coach. I'm a high performance coach. That's the bulk of what I do. My coaching journey actually began after a pretty serious knee injury that stopped my playing career. I was fortunate enough to play some pretty high level tennis in a few places in this world. I trained as a junior here in South Africa for a while. I was at a performance center in Pretoria, and then went back to Zimbabwe, where I'm actually from. Spent a few years developing, and then got an offer to go out to France. Spent a year out there, and I came back to Zim, and then got a scholarship to attend varsity in Tennessee in America. So I went, spent 4 years in the collegiate system, which was eye-opening coming from Africa, just being a kid full of dreams, but the realities of what you actually need to do to sustain such a high level of tennis. Post-college, started to play on a circuit known as the Challenger Circuit, which is one tier below what everyone watches on TV, which is the ATP. And I gave that a go for about a year when I suffered my injury. And post-injury, drifted a little bit, spent a year in the UK. But that's really where my coaching journey began, is me not wanting to lose touch with the court. I tried jobs and put on a suit and tie and become an adult like everyone expected me to. And I was the most miserable guy in the world. I just realized that I belonged on a tennis court, and I just got myself back out there. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do on a court, but ended up running into some kids who just needed some help, trying to hit some balls, and fell in love with the process of helping someone else, get closer to their dreams. And I realized that I think was actually helpful to some of these kids. And what I actually really believe in is really the transformative power of sport. What it does, especially to our less privileged African communities. I look at the guys that I grew up on the same street with, and you realize as an adult, in retrospect, that the only difference between us was that when I woke up, I went to this place called a tennis court instead of hanging around in the street corner. Our lives are very divergent. Some of these guys are in prison now, and like I say, we were no different. We were from the same, kind of class, and that's what really, lit a switch in my head that this medium is actually pretty powerful to impact young lives. And So I found myself in Australia. I got invited out there by a teammate that I had played with in Tennessee, and I started working with six provincially. My eyes opened to the demands of high level tennis, and what it really was. It's amazingly difficult, and I find myself explaining this a lot to people because tennis just looks, superficially like that thing that's an easy craft to pick up. But I'm sure, speaking to coaches in the different disciplines, you've got an appreciation of what it takes. I've developed a healthy respect of anyone called a professional, because of the dedication that it just run into, people in life who just represent a tenacious ethos, and that's what it was to me. Is I realized that tennis really is a microcosm of life, so to speak. All the battles that you go through on a tennis court, the same discipline that you need, the application, the disappointments, the highs, the lows, how to ride those, and how to stay focused on goals, to me is just literally talking about the same struggles that we have through life. And so this is with coaching. And post Australia. Sorry, I'm just going to flash forward a bit. It's a bit of a long story. I found myself in Pietermaritzburg here in South Africa. I met my boss at that time in Western Australia. He had come out for his honeymoon, and we had a conversation, and he told me he was, planning on upscaling his academy. It sounded like a great idea at the time. It would bring me back. Zimbabwe, I'll be a flight away from the folks, and Africa's just it's home. That's the other thing that happened to me throughout all of these episodes is I never felt like I was at home out there. It was cool to see all of those things, but I always knew that at some point in time I would come back here, and so this was an opportunity to come back home and do the same kind of work that I was doing in Western Australia. But unfortunately for me, this guy turned out to be, to the image that he portrayed. And it wasn't a great opportunity. It wasn't a great decision to come down here at the time because, I realized that I came to a completely different setup to what he had described to me. But at the same time, this disappointment turned out to be a blessing in the long run because I really just focused on the work. Put the disappointments aside of everything else that was going on and decided, you know what, you might as well make use of this opportunity because I did have the opportunity to go into, some of the best school. I had access to into schools like Hilton College, Michael House, St. Anne's, and those kinds of class of schools. And I realized that I could grow my portfolio and actually just get on with the work and worry about the other things later. And this was really my college of coaching, so to speak. It was working with a wide range of kids, from toddlers. Youngest kid at the time is like Lucy, Jobs' favorite. She was 3 at the time, the young. And so you really learn all facets of coaching. You learn to analyze movements. You learn to understand the psyche behind sport, and working with kids of a different age really forces you to understand the human side of these athletes and not just put a number to them and expectations, but to actually try and engage the person. And to me, when you actually establish that kind of connection, then whatever athletic endeavor you're going for becomes, a lot. Flash forward my bad episode in Maritzburg, found myself given an opportunity to come here to Durban and work at Westville Boys High in a smaller capacity. I was engaged by an academy, pro tennis academy, that was actually contracted to Westville. So that was how I ended up kind of getting into Westville. So I ended up being a border master here, and I worked with some of the younger tennis players under head coach at the time, and really just fell in love with the culture of the place. This is in Africa that you can walk into a sports office and have some of the expertise that we do have out here. And everything about the ethos of the place was just the breath of fresh air that I was waiting for. And it really just gave me an opportunity to also reboot in a personal capacity and refocus. And a couple of years later, I find myself given the opportunity of being the actual head coach of Westfield Boys High tennis, and I've spent the last couple of weeks planning a program for the boys and kind of modernizing training methods and really engaging with the boys themselves, because I think when you're trying to create a program, one of the things I've learned is, again, to focus on the kids and not our image of what we think is right for them, but to listen to them and take cues from these kids of what they actually, the kind of environment that they're comfortable in, because I believe when anyone is comfortable, then results are easier to attain. So in a nutshell, that is my story. Yeah.
No, thank you, Charles, for your story, and I think your story is it's an awesome one. As a guy that loves travel, obviously you mentioned a few places there, and through conversations with you, you've spoken to me about how tough it was when you got to America and you got to you became Kunta Kinte, and people that know Kunta Kinte from Roots. For me, when you told me that, I was like, what? But you were think about how difficult was it for you in that environment where you knew, especially and tennis at that time, I suppose, predominantly now even, it's challenging for a young black male. How was that?
Look, thanks for that one, Jabs. It's something that shapes you along the way. I believe strongly in reactions, shaping how the rest of the conversation goes. So, the world, you will have your people who have their radical opinions, and to me, it's all about how the individual reacts to these different opinions. Tennis has always been a tough arena for a black kid. It was pretty tough, and a lot of adults, parents, people who've got vested interest in the sports, coaches, tried to make sure from the time that we were juniors in Zimbabwe anyway, that a black face was nowhere near the top. Kids who were associated with you really felt that you were the wrong color and that you were trying to do something that was pretty much impossible. But I think there's two kinds of people in this world. They're people that bow down to pressure, and then they're kind of people like me, coal under pressure, can produce diamonds sometimes. And I believe that sometimes adversity shapes athletes, better than cush surroundings do. And that turned out to be the case with me. I think I had a dad who was pivotal in my development as a player. He brought the kind of, at the time we didn't even know it was called mental coaching, but he was my first mental coach. He gave me a strength every day before I had a big match. He would talk to me and make me realize the significance of what I was going out there to do. You had a lot of pressure. It was almost like you're going out there to represent your race. Sometimes you're going out there to represent your country, because I was just a Zimbabwean kid who found myself sometimes at high level tournaments here in South Africa and abroad, and of being a tennis player. So, the same thing did happen. I did experience quite a bit of culture shock when I got to America. People talk to you and tell you that you're going to encounter weird people and all of that kind of thing. But it still turned out to be quite challenging for me. The first 6 months were exceptionally difficult. No one could understand my English. I had to learn to twang and speak like them and yell and drawl and all of that. And yeah, Jabs and I have had a few laughs over, quite a few of these stories. Those guys actually could be. In a lot of instances, I was surprised by how little they actually know of the rest of the world. And we actually as Africans have got a much broader understanding of world dynamics than the typical American does. They live in their own bubble, and if you don't fit into that bubble, you struggle. It's that simple. And so I enjoyed the experience. It was cool, for a 16, 17-year-old kid to get out there and see, all of that. It was that being said, I never felt at home there, which was a difference, that because I also had a sister who was a very good tennis player, and she also came over on a scholarship, but she stayed. She's actually still in Dallas, and we were different. She settled in. She managed to assimilate. I didn't. I always have been who I am, and it's not easy having to develop another persona so you fit into a place. Because if people can't accept you for who you really are, then what are you doing there? So that's, but yeah, had a lot of interesting episodes with some guys who initially, to me, I think we had a very interesting discussion as well with Thoks and Jubs. Where I said that when I arrived, some of the guys who were the nastiest, to me at that point in time, turned out to be the best friends that I still have today, which is quite a switch. But to me, it was just, I was something that was different to these guys. Some of these guys have never had a conversation with a black man, let alone an African black man, of where these guys are coming from. Then instead of me getting upset and riled up over, the Kunta Kintes and all of these, tasteless jibes, I chose to try and understand, because they were equally alien to me as I was to them. So, that being said, you kind of try and understand why someone has got such radical opinions. And I think when you come from a context of trying to understand psyches, then it becomes more a longer process of engagement rather than just.
All right. No, thank you, Charles. Thoks, Zulu. Talk us through how you coached. Obviously, you were at Westville for a very long time, and that started, and you were coaching all sorts of sports, and you find yourself today as one of the coaches at the Dolphins in the B side there. Can you just talk us through your whole development as a coach, how it all started?
It probably starts with growing sportsmen coached by some different characters who probably didn't grow athletes as well as they could have. So that is my foundation, and probably the reason why I love coaching. So I started at Westville Boys High, joined a learnership program that tested me, and I was privileged enough to coach various sports. You had like one term soccer, another cricket, another, and I really enjoyed it. I climbed ranks within that coaching at Westville Boys High. Eventually got to a point where I was up with the first side with the cricket coach, and I'd worked with various athletes, which I really enjoyed. I did sports management as a study, a diploma, so it really entrenched the fact that I actually wanted to do this thing. Coaching, it might be in administration, but I knew that it was definitely going to be in sport. So eventually got to a point where I was managing hockey, and I was privileged enough to work with some massive athletes there. And I was a provincial hockey manager, and I think, eventually got to 7 IPTs, interprovincial tournaments. And yeah, with all that, I was still learning my trade as a young coach. Westville Boys High. In fact, I was going to go to Joburg and go join dear Jubs and Glenn to go and do some coaching there. Unfortunately, that fell through purely because I'd already done 3 Coke weeks with the under-19s, the provincial side, and it was felt that my experience now was needed at the union. So I left Westville Boys High, went to Pinetown Boys, massive challenge. I ran sports there for only a year, and then the full-time post came up at the union, and then I was privileged enough to then move across there. So then my journey then became mostly cricket, and I tinkered with some rugby coaching at club in terms of collegians, but eventually even that had to fade away. Did some coaching at a school like Clifton, part-time, and the journey has been ongoing. But yeah, so generally at the moment, I'm a B-side assistant coach with KZN Coastal, and really loving life at the moment.
Now you mentioned. Sorry, Glenn.
Sorry, Jabs. Just No, you've mentioned that you obviously coaching at school, and then you've coached you're coaching with the KZN Coastals, and it's quite a lot of adjusting that you have to do over there in terms of going from school level to professional level, as well as the adjustment that you have to do between rugby, cricket, and hockey, and all at a high level. And that, those sports all take a different mentality. It's a different type of individual. So not only are you adjusting across age groups and professionalism, but you're also adjusting across sports like quite a bit as well. And yes, we do it at schools, but it's different at schools because it's kids. Tell me how have you adapted to that? How have you managed with that adjustment?
It is difficult at times, but generally, if I'm true to myself and true to my athletes, then the day flows. I mean, if in one day I'm going from a morning session with a private cricket session, I go and work with senior athletes. The guys are ranging from 19 to 28, and then it's team based. And then in the afternoon, going into evening, I'm back in with the 13-year-old in a different code, or 14-year-old. I've just become so used to getting on with it. Probably more difficult when I first started. It's bread and butter, mate. You know how it is. Adjust. The gist of it. I don't think about it. It just happens.
Awesome. Yeah. Thoks, I'd like to know, I've been watching a lot of the test. Justin Langer watched the Mumbai Indians as well, Jai Warden, and something that became very apparent to me is the amount of time spent on the mental side of the game, which is something Charles spoke about as well, touched on as well. And I want to bring you back in here as well, Charles, as well as Thoks. What your approach is to the mental side of the game. How do you, in your specific sports, yes, cricket is a team sport, but I realize more and more how much players like watching Finch in that series, and where I see Finch going through a difficult time. He's not scoring runs, and he sort of goes within himself, and then the coaches have to talk him through, and the processes he has to go through to find his game again, and not going to that dark place in himself. What is your approach with your cricket players when they might be out of form, or when they are on form, to keep them on form? You go about that. And Charles, from your side, from a tennis approach, how you go about it, because tennis can be a very lonely place. In fact, I always say I wouldn't be able to play a sport like tennis. I played some badminton. I was actually a provincial badminton player. But I know how difficult it can be when you're on a court on your own and things are not going well. It's a very lonely place. So I'd like to know both of your approaches to the mental aspect. Thoks, if you can start with.
All right. So I just like to. It is probably easier for the guys to help pick up a player that they recognize to be going through something. And once that happens, it's important for teammates to rally together and help the guy through. So that could be in various ways. That could be at practice, just positive reinforcements from the teammates, from the coaching staff, being able to understand his psyche, that he's not in the best place, and so might need a bit more comfort. Spending some one-on-one time with him is important. Perhaps after the training or before the training, to pump him up so that he's feeling a little bit more positive. And maybe as a coach, recognizing when he's doing good things and letting him know in front of the group, just so that he stays motivated. Although it is a team sport, there's a lot of emphasis on myself as a batter or a bowler or an all-round, perform and execute my skills. So it's important that we recognize what he is being selected for and be able to get him up. It's a big challenge. A batsman can receive one ball in a game and he's done. He's now watching the rest of the game and having to contribute on the field from a fielding point. So it's very important that he has had a failure, but he can still still contribute to the performance of the team, and that we could still win this game. So whether you're going through tough times or good times as an athlete, you have to understand that. So it would be me explaining that to the athletes, and perhaps being in an environment where I have the luxury of calling on a sports psychologist to speak to the athlete. That also helps. That can also be a good way to go about things. But just one-on-one time with that athlete. And sometimes it goes into the nighttime where I call the guy, hey, let's meet up, have a chat. Let's chat about some things whilst having a sip of some coffee.
Sure, bud. All right, Charles.
For me, I think the mental aspect of tennis is a little bit larger in scale than a lot of other sports. We were also having, I think, part of this discussion a couple of days ago, and I mentioned just how big the psychological right from elementary levels, it's again about environment. A lot of the training that tennis coaches go through prescribes a lot of the more some of the aspects that Thoks also mentioned, which is that positive environment, the positive reinforcement. If kids are not having fun, they essentially lose the will to want to participate in the set activity. So to me, negative behaviors, and I'm talking about probably from ages 3 to about 12, 13. A lot of the focus is non-competitive because it being a competitive sport, you've got to try and cushion the kids as much as you can. And so at that point in time, to me, a lot of it is just engaging the player. It's about establishing a human connection. To me, every player is different. So what a lot of coaches I find tend to do is to follow manuals. We will read a manual and try to universe kids and try and achieve the same results. But I find that it's take the time to get to know what makes an athlete tick, and when you understand that, then you can get through to them a lot better. And that understanding takes time, and that's the thing that I think a lot of us as coaches tend to bypass, because we've got our qualifications that establish our knowledge bases and all of that. But I think despite whatever certification we do achieve, we've got to really take time to see these athletes as people, what makes them tick. Because one kid, like we were saying, again, might respond to a bit of a shove, a bit of a firmer touch, and yet another kid can actually be affected negatively by that. So you've got to take the time to understand which kid needs a hug, and which kid needs a kick up the backside, so to speak. So that's what I find is tennis is a mental discipline. It's to me 60% mental and 40% physical. So the emphasis, as we go closer to pro, becomes a lot on controlling your mind, and regulating emotions. So that being said, quite a bit of knowledge. I found myself, deep in a lot of psychology books, and there's also a profound difference. I was listening to Talk speak once again about the duality of cricket, and tennis does have that element, which I'm starting to deal with now. I now have 6 boys who are highly competitive provincial players, and I am tasked with transforming 6 guys who play against each other at a provincial and national level. And now I've got to kind of tread a fine line of kind of dumbing down the competitiveness in them in order to build a team ethos, but at the same time not losing it altogether, so they still have the aggression that we need, the controlled aggression that we need on the tennis court. So yes, it is quite a delve into mental aspects when it comes to tennis coaching. We go pretty deep into that.
Thank you, Charles and Talks. And one of the things that you mentioned there, Charles, which really speaks to me is about the fun element. And having watched a lot of the stuff that you guys do, both you and Talks, the fun is definitely a key component to the environments that you create. I like to take the mickey out of yourselves and not be too serious. Talks, I had the privilege of obviously watching you come to Westville and watching your sessions. And also, when I was at King David, you're really good at sometimes coming. I remember the one game before we played St. Peter's, you came and you worked with our first team, and you actually even stayed for the game. And that was really cool. And the sessions were some of the best the guys had. And they said, well, I mean, they really enjoyed having. In fact, so much so, which was the following week. And for me, if a team really wants you to come back, they don't want certain coaches to come back. They want coaches to come back and have fun with them, and coaches that create the right environment. So I'm appreciative, and I learned a lot from you from that, in terms of that regard.
Because still there's a few. You're gonna see us coming. And if you do, they would have lost. Don't give an audience.
You ready? Right, go. Squash. Good job. Pick it up and perfect. And we? Smart cookie. Go. Remember, don't throw it too high so that you can get back fast. Don't forget to get back fast. Go. Squashy. And? Not the dance, Granny. Well done. And what? You forgot to run. Someone was busy dancing. She forgot to do it. See, that bug got through. Right, back onto your stoppie. Don't let these bugs get through. You got to stop them before they get past you.
As well. Thabz, this is a perfect opportunity to bring you into the conversation, because I remember all the conversations we'd have on the drive as Dromedaris and Opirif boys. And then we'd drive in I think it was the Blue Jet at that time, initially.
Black Panther.
Eventually the Black Panther came into the equation. But, and just the amount of stuff I learned from you. And I mean, there were some girls in your soccer team initially who you were coaching, and I was thinking to myself, hey, I don't know how you have. I'm not going to certain characters that I'm thinking, I don't know how you do it, but the passion that you had for those girls and the fun. In fact, I would look over and think, hey, maybe I'm a bit of a fraud. My sessions are nowhere near as fun as the sessions that you're having there. So I learned a lot from you as well. Can you just talk us through who Thabang is, how he came into the coaching, where he is now, and your philosophy? Because I really love your philosophy of coaching.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's good to meet you, Charles.
Same here.
Yeah, I remember, and yeah, matric was like a year where stuff just happened because time elapsed. So got to the end of the year, I had applied for university the next year, but I'd been a leader at school, so I'd wanted to do some leadership work in sport. Always thought I'd coach girls. Fortunately, I got an opportunity to coach boys basketball at St. John's College, under 15 team. Really, truth is, I coached what I knew to NBA as much as we do now, and a whole host of sports like we do now. I lived with my grandmother, didn't have DSTV, so I coached what I was taught. But what I've always tried to do, maybe I'm a fraud, maybe I get away with not knowing a lot about sport, I just connect with the individuals. Treat each person as an individual. I remember your name, I remember your story, I remember what you're about, and I coach you and I speak to you directly. I remember when you've done something right and why you didn't teach that, and I just dealt with the individuals. So it's from 2005, I started coaching twice a year in the basketball terms, which is mid-January till last week of February, first week of March, and then again around October, November. That happened for 2005, 6, 7, and 8 at St. John's College. Most of those fixtures that we played in the time, like 90%, we lost. Even though over the time we had guys who I really built very good relationships with, so much so one of them to my traditional. But yeah, building good relationships, even though we were losing, but we were really, really tight. I'm still thinking back to guys I coached in 2006 who I'm still quite cool with now. and chat on WhatsApp with. And then 2009, probably the biggest coaching change happened for me when a coach who unfortunately has passed away came from Zimbabwe. His name was Ronald Garura, came to St. John's, and he really changed the philosophy there at St. John's. He had us singing from one hymn book and focused really on not over-coaching, which I think is what I did for most of the time in 8, to keeping the game very simple, having as many boys playing, boys at the time, but as many kids playing, a lot of time with the ball, running a lot, getting tired and subbing people and getting back another team in. I thought that was fantastic, and that really changed me. If I can confess something that I was thinking about, and that changed me from being very competitive and very focused on the result initially. I was very focused on the result and driving boys towards getting a win rather than just having fun and just playing the game. Because I remember one day I was coaching under 16s and we played St. Benedict's, 5 boys on the court, 7 boys on the bench. St. Benedict's was a team that had beaten us a lot of times, but chasing the victory too much, I didn't make any substitutions that day. And what that actually meant is 7 boys came there on a Saturday keen to play, win or lose, and they didn't get a chance to play because I was chasing a victory. And that's a shocker. Can't do that to young people. Sports is a game. The victory is not more important than their experience. It really changed my philosophy and how I approach sport. 2010, went into working in corporate a bit. 2011, Glenn, you and Jobs really, on a personal note, really helped my life and the trajectory that my life was going. Got an opportunity to go back to university to finish my qualification, which has been one of the cornerstones of the career that I've got now, which is in corporate. But Glenn, that year that I coached, that it was throughout the year. 2, I coached girls and boys, which stretched me, which was fantastic. And also I got to coach individuals who had different skill sets. 1, very limited skills, to guys who were very, very talented. And that was amazing. And personally, it meant a lot for my career trajectory, for my current career. And I'm very grateful for what you did for me that year. Yeah, and then since then, I think Jobs was 2014 or something. I think you were 16?
2016.
A random Saturday, gave you a call. You said you're going to be at Jeppe coaching basketball. I was like, what? I'm going to come. Drove down to Jeppe. Drove very fast, I remember. To Jeppe. Got to the sideline. Kind of gave you 1 or 2 tips. And you're like, stuff this. And got to coach boys. And oh, man, got to meet boys who are now in matric. Really, really grateful for that. And over the last 4 years, I've been jumping in and out because my main priority has been my corporate job, but where I've been able to, I've been trying to help out at Parktown, particularly the end of last year. Yeah, so that's been my story. But yeah, when I met you guys and at King David, up until now, sport has really been about let the kids have fun. I coach sports where they use balls, so let them touch the ball, let them kick the ball as much as possible, let them run them. Just maximize the time that we've got with them. It's precious, and let them have fun. If they have fun, you have fun. You feed off their energy. You laugh at yourself. You laugh at them, and it's just a beautiful thing. You get to live life together with the kids that you get to coach. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, Coach Thabz, that's wonderful. If there's one thing I remember, is that every time I had to take players that had been coached by you, it was always difficult to try and get them to respond to me again, because obviously with you they had so much fun, and then I had to coach them. It was a case of what's this boring guy doing? Like, he's just going to make us work, make us run hard. So it was always difficult, hard act to follow. And in particular, the way that you spoke to the children as well. And I think they responded quite well to you. They responded to your passion. Not only were you passionate about the sport that you were coaching, I think you were passionate about the people that you were working with, and that definitely came across. And the patience, I think, most of all, is the patience. I think when you did basketball, you you speak about limited talent and limited skills. King David basketball at that point in time had very limited skills and limited talent, but you made it work. And how was that experience? How was that time that you had to try and build basketball at King David?
About it, Glenn, was at King David, basketball specifically, that was the most basketballs I'd ever had, ever. I used to coach like 25 boys with 4 balls. But really, yeah, I mean, look, at that time I was planning my coaching sessions meticulously. I was planning a season and breaking it up into different sessions per week and trying to track development. And of course, we had people who were all in, and then you had kids who were just like, hey man, I'm just passing time here, I'm waiting for my mom to fetch me. So it was tough. And of course, at the time, you know, with the weekly calendar, we couldn't do Saturday games, which was quite limiting. So I remember going into your office a lot of times to make calls to different schools to organize friendlies, and fortunately we were able to go and have a lot of games. So thank you for that as well. It stretched me, but for sport, guys, I think if you know me, I really love sport, and I would just throw that at the kids and they would grab something. But the bottom line is they're just good kids. They're just good kids. And you'll end up talking the same language once you spend more and more time with them. That's what I found with them. But yeah, it's hard losing games, even though I was used to it. But yeah, look, I mean, bottom line is they were good kids. Glenn, speaking to a friend of mine before coaching at King David, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm a Christian guy. My faith is important. Is it going to be an issue? Because they're Jewish and they're quite staunch in their faith. And my friend just said to me, you know, the bottom line is it's not about religion. Just love them. Just love them. And I came into it with just love them. And whether they were super talented or not, kind of keen wasting my time and their own time, or really committed, yeah, nothing much to it.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier on that you had an epiphany the one time when you had 7 players that you didn't put on the court. And now the question would be, if I had to bounce that, take it back to you and say, if there was a final of, let's call it a basketball St. John's tournament, Parktown is in the final, and it's do or die. Would you make the same decision in terms of how you're going to chase the game, or will you play all of your players knowing that it could jeopardize the result in that sense?
So back then, the 5 on the court were the most talented 5. And at that time, I looked at the individuals too much and not so much the team. And right now, I've really focused on the fundamentals of sport, and then we add a little bit of tactics here and there. I would have rather played everyone. So my new philosophy is to play everyone. Everyone is there. It's a whole team. If we lose, 5 don't lose, the whole team loses. So we all part of it. I won't make a sub just for making a sub's sake. But right now, I think I look at the game a lot more tactically, and I think my tactical analysis is a lot better than it was back then. So I'd rather play players in the system, and we'd win.
Okay. All right. Just a question about sportsmanship, and I'm going to ask the 3 of you to just add a little bit on this one over here. Sportsmanship and having good sportsmanship and good attitude and things like that is something that varies from different ages and different sports. In tennis, you by yourself. We see a lot of the time tennis players on TV getting frustrated, throwing rackets around. In basketball's a colorful sport. I've often seen attitudes and players, like coaches talking to players and players having attitude back kind of thing. And coaches
Cricketers, clearly.
colourful. They're really out there. I mean, Thabz, you work with a certain person like Desmond, but yeah, he's a colourful, very colourful character. And Talks cricket is different. It's gentleman sport, but at the same time, people might have attitude in the sense of you might not be might not be batting up the line higher up the order than they are. And how do you handle that attitude in tennis, in basketball, and in cricket, like in your own sport, that bad sportsmanship? Anyone can go.
I think for me, yeah, for me personally, sportsmanship is huge on the agenda. I think I've been listening to the other guys across disciplines speak, and the common denominator for me is developing a human being, above an athlete, a decent human being at that, and that has to be the main focus. I think very few, if we even look statistically at, maybe slightly different in context because I'm a high push that are actually going to make it as a pro, you find that it's probably 5 to 10% if you're really good and blessed to work with high level talent. So I don't think that the thrust should be on win at all costs, because part of the skill set, part of my ethos is we're trying to transform lives via the medium of tennis. So we're not trying to create a monster that slams rackets and disrespects other human beings, because then he's not functional in society, and you've actually failed kids who pass their matric and go on to get a degree and never touch a racket again, than to have pig-headed tennis players who will in my opinion have some kind of social deficiency. So I think from my perspective, quite simply, sportsmanship is number one on the agenda before we talk about anything else.
I agree. I mean, with the context in which I coached, wherever you're playing at under 14, you're going to play with for the next 5 years. You're going up each age group with the opportunity to make friends, great opportunity for sportsmanship. You don't lose rivalry or your desire to win because you're not rude. I think there's any room for that. And we're all professionals. We can respect each other. We might not support each other. We might challenge each other. It's perfectly fine. Sports allows us to do that. But we definitely don't have to do it in an ugly way. I'm with you 100%.
So I believe that, we're all just human beings getting along, and we're trying to perfect our sports code. And there's I've got no time, personally, I've got no time for a man who's going to be super eye in the team environment. And if that person is going to carry on to act away for themselves, and they're going to carry on behaving or misbehaving, then that person down the line has to be either canned or they've got to toe the line. There's a place for competitivity, yeah? For a guy who's competitive, but we've got no place for guys who are going to be arrogant. So I suppose it becomes then the job of the coach to identify if the person's having a negative team, and then use his or her skills to then chisel away at that character that is having that negative effect. Generally, though, you don't fight fire with fire. That arrogant, pompous person is going to be worse off for you handling it in that way. So sometimes you just have to dig deep, and I think that's how I look at it.
Just to maybe balance that coin a little bit, I will say though, coming from an individual sport, is we do get to a level where the competitive nature is a requirement. So, you know, I have struggled with some kids who are unbelievably talented, but just lack the controlled aggression to you know, push through adversity. So that, you know, another common denominator of high-level tennis players is an arrogance to a degree. If you don't believe you're Superman, then you probably won't do impossible things. So I think there's a balance that needs to be struck. I try not to kill off the competitor because it's one of the traits that I actually seek in the kids that I end up working with a bit closer. Is I watch little kids and how they deal with falling over and little things like that. How they deal with, you know, a little bit of embarrassment in a group, that are slightly more resilient than others. And that being a natural trait, we latch onto that and try and develop that, because you need an inner warrior to be a good tennis player. So I would be lying if I said that it's all about humility and team ethos. No, there will be points in time that I actually sit a kid in a locker room and try to convince him that he is Superman.
And that's beautiful and necessary. One thing that you said, Thabang, which I really, really loved. If I was to, and uNkulunkulu angibusise please with a long life, but if I was to, I pass away and somebody had to say, what type of coach was Jabs? I would hope that people would say he was a mixture of Thoks, Thabz, and Charles, because I think the responses that you say, they speak to me. If I was in a church, things would okay, it's amen, amen, amen the whole time, because it resonates with me wholeheartedly. When you say, I remember your name, I remember your story, you did.
That's
that
big.
For me, the common denominator between all of us. Sorry, Glenn, I left you out of that equation. But
Thanks.
all of us, you belong in that equation. I'm saying Glenn, Thabz, Thoks, Charles, all of us are in that equation where we can have chats, Thabang, and we've done it on many occasions where we speak and I laugh about ladies. Thabang never used to discipline the kid, a harsh discipline. It was always
no, he never.
His harshest words were ladies, which meant he was really frustrated with it. He was always about a great environment. Thoks, I know you massive on self-analysis, not having to be the guy that's disciplining harshly, but just ask questions of, but how could we have done this better? And what do you think about how you behaved here? I love that approach. And Charles as well, massive on the mental side and getting the best out of kids and seeing an individual for who he is as an individual. And I love that. And what I would love to ask you guys right now is, what are the stories that you would say, this was one of my most memorable moments, be it with the team or with a player? And you guys have worked in different sports codes, and maybe Charles not so much, but Thabang, Thoks, Charles, you'll tell us as well, but the stories which you think about when you think about your greatest teams or your greatest individuals, and it doesn't have the greatest in terms of ability, but in terms of moments that touched you. If you can each just share moments for us, one or two moments. If we can start with you, Charles.
For me, it's quite easy because it's current right now. I remember telling you last week that I just got a call from the States about one of the kids that I've been working with. I'm also involved in tennis development. You know, I think it's important to try and level the playing field for our African kids and get them in the sport and, you know, gradually eliminate this elitist view that people have of tennis, and that has been the case for so long. So I'm a development officer with Tequini Tennis. Two boys at present, the oldest two boys that I work with, one of them, his name is Monashe. So we've just secured a 4-year scholarship for him at the University of Arkansas. And this is a kid that I met 2 years ago. And I worked with initially 15 kids in this development program, because what I saw were kids who pitch up every single day. You know, I work in pretty affluent schools, and you find that half of my job is, you know, to keep motivating the kids. Money or daddy wants them to do this thing and they're really not into it. And now you're stuck with this kid who actually has no passion, you know, for the sport at all. And those are tricky situations. But then the flip side of why I love working with development so much is these kids are hungry. They come from backgrounds that, you know, this is probably the only channel of, you know, tangible success in their lives. And this was the case with these two boys. It was Nkosietu and Munashe. Nkosietu, you know, actually went on a tour for Australia and number 6 in KZN. I worked with them for 2 years now. and we trying to clear a path for him as well to get into the collegiate system in America. And Munashe, you know, is a kid that I met 2 years ago, was ranked number 81 in KZN, and I was nowhere on the national radar. And as we speak right now, he's ranked number 6 under 19 boys in KZN. And I've never met a more hardworking kid. You know, you usually have to push some kids, but this is a kid who, the moment that I committed to work, told him my expectations. And, you know, I'm a busy coach because I'm trying to establish myself in a world that isn't necessarily ready for a forceful black coach. So, you know, I've spent a lot of extra time after work when you're tired and all of that, but you remember that this is a life for these kids. So me going home to, you know, stretch out on my bed and watch telly at the expense of me, you know, pushing a kid closer to his dream, it's an obvious choice. And this kid went from, you know, being ridiculed at tournaments. Actually, a lot of people used to laugh at how he just keeps entering tournaments and all that made it to your further rounds. And, you know, but I looked at his physical attributes. I saw potential in him. He was an intelligent, respectful boy who is built like a tank. He's 6'3" and is one of the best athletes, the best natural athletes that I've had the pleasure of working with. So my job was pretty easy. I just knew that if I can build a tennis brain in this boy and teach him exactly how to move, we've got a player on our hands. And that's turned out to be the case. He's a kid that's, you know, now, and what I love the most is the humility is stuck. And he understands now that it's a process and he needs to keep working, you know, as he heads out to America. And so this is to me what brings me the most joy in coaching, is just watching these kids that you meet as a rough-looking little 13, 14-year-old, and you watch them get on a plane and head off to the States and head off to Europe, and that's what brings me joy in my life.
So for me, it's a bit of a while ago now. 2011, I got an absolute privilege of coaching the embody. Fantastic under 16A soccer team. Incredibly talented boys who had great relationships with each other, grew up with each other. But we changed how we played football. Stopped playing 4-4-2. We played 4-3-3. We had guys who wouldn't sniff the A team all of a sudden in the A team, like Craig Fritchell and Davis.
Brandon Davis.
Al-Hanan, you know, typically not in the mold of the players who typically played that in that team, but the boys lifted team over and they played the best soccer I've seen at high school. The boys were talented, but not all of them were superstars, but they played great football. Jobs, there was one Sunday that you and I got to go to Aaron's house. And all the boys were there. And we played a FIFA tournament and destroyed them, first of all. We played soccer outside. We had hot dogs. We were chilling with the parents and everything. And the mom that day, she had never seen those boys so together. And she had never heard them come back to speak so much about soccer as she had that year. And had it not been for Glenn giving me the opportunity, had it not been for those boys being profoundly talented and good kids, had not been for you bringing through that KNVB Dutch soccer coaching that you had received, none of that would have been possible. It's the best I've ever had, best sporting year ever. I remember we went down to Cape Town and beat German school 13-0 on an immaculate pitch. 13-0, unbeatable, those boys. Yeah, it was really great. I mean, the season, we didn't end up as champions. We lost only in the semi-finals, unfortunately. I cried even. But they mean a lot to me. It was quality young men.
I'll go from under 50, and an incredible under 15 side that I had. I tried some new stuff. I actually sat in classes. They were an extremely ill-disciplined bunch just coming through the school, and I felt like if I could bring if I could bring their sports into their classroom, then it could help the kids actually develop better, and I'd have a stronger say, stronger say with them when it comes to rugby. So I remember attending biology classes, maths classes. School has changed. I can't even understand the stuff anymore. I remember I'd monitor and ask questions, or I'd monitor how many of them actually participated in the classes, how many of them got kicked out. I remember we'd get to the afternoon training sessions, and that's what we would address first. All right, so we'd call them out. Okay, so 7 guys got kicked out today, and as a standard rule, we punished the bad act of being kicked out of the class. And this a while, and I could see results actually changing. I had positive spin-offs from that. So for me, that was probably the most incredible time, or the one moment from a school point of view, from a senior cricket point of view. The time I bought a massive boombox, and we'd use it at practice. We'd use it at warm-up time for game days. Let's understand, I'm coaching, and we're playing at these very traditional grounds, Kingsmead, traveling to the Wanderers, and here's this guy with this boombox. What is he doing? He's disrespecting our sport, and I couldn't actually give. We would carry on doing it, and my team was pretty comfortable with it, and we started doing well. When we did actually introduce it, the boys are so relaxed. They love music. We won a trophy, and that was possibly I needed to have, because along the way, obviously, I received some nasty words from opposition who didn't think that it was an okay thing to do. So those are probably 2 big things that I've had or I've participated in.
Thank you very much, guys. All 3 of you. It's been a real privilege. I think we need to wrap it up now. It's been a real privilege to have you guys, to speak to you guys. As obviously a brother of Thoks, and you guys are brothers to me as well, in terms of how much I've learned from you and how much I know I will continue to learn from each of you. I thank you for always being there to lend an ear and to grow me, and long may it continue. I'm so blessed to have you guys. So thank you for taking time to chat to us.
Yeah, I must.
Thank you, Jobs. Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks a lot. Charles, very insightful stuff that you gave there, and Thoks, always lovely chatting to you. You know how it is. And Thabang, we'll see you in the basketball court soon again. Hopefully we'll have a season at the end of the year. And let's see how it goes. But thank you so much. And as an old soul, it's always nice to learn from younger guys. And you guys have definitely taught me quite a bit along the way. Thanks, kids.
Sorry, would you mind if I said one thing for just 10 seconds?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I work in corporate. I have no issues. But you guys really get to work in an amazing space. Sport is amazing. I think it's got transformative powers, not only for ourselves as coaches, but for kids and whoever we coach.
Yeah, gents, thank you very much.
Thanks again, guys. Appreciate the opportunity. You guys are awesome.
I've got to start my whole. Could you not have allowed me to finish my link into Thabang and then stop?
It's gone like it would have cut you off.
I hope I can say that on this recording.
and come from a level that's going to speak to that person. There could be there could be many reasons for them acting away in that fashion. So.
Hello.
We've lost Thabang. Okay. I'm sure when he comes back, he has frozen. So let's.
Some editing for Liat.
Yeah, there'll be quite a bit there to edit.
Yeah, thank you. Being the youngest on the panel, I'd like to say thank you.
All right.